My husband, a renowned photographer, would often sleep with models when taking their intimate photos, claiming it was part of his art. Yet, years ago, after Richard, my police officer father, was injured saving him, he knelt before my mother, Eleanor, begging for my hand in marriage. Now, as the 99th model entered the studio, I was ordered to kneel on the floor, holding her discarded clothes. The next second, a heavy metal stand crashed down onto my head. 3 years, and you can't even hold onto a piece of clothing? I told you to stay here and watch so you could learn how to be a good clothes hanger, not a stumbling block. I wiped away the blood seeping from my forehead and submissively bowed, admitting my fault. Everyone thought that a woman like me, an unrecognized presence by his side, had long been worn down until I had no backbone left. But then I completely vanished from his lens. Ethan, the man who never stayed with any woman, searched for me for a full 7 years. Ethan glared at me fiercely, seeing me calmly kneeling on the floor, utterly silent. The spot I'd just wiped with my sleeve bled red again. A foot suddenly slammed into my side. I curled up instantly, sweating from the pain. Cat got your tongue? Playing silent games with me, are we? Do you really think I can't see through you? No matter how deeply you hide your intentions, I'll strip them bare. His boot ground into my bones again, and the pain made my vision go black. I struggled to my feet, trying to resist. But he leaned closer and whispered a threat in my ear. Richard is still lying in the hospital. If no one taught you, I will. I stiffened. Suppressing my rage, I lowered my head and continued kneeling. The photoshoot resumed. The two figures before me began to intertwine, and gasps and moans filled my ears. He had enacted countless intimate scenes with other women right in front of me. Once, he even made me kneel at the edge of the bed, demanding I count the times he was intimate. That night. I don't know how much time passed. My knees had gone numb, and my lower abdomen ached so much I could no longer maintain the kneeling posture. I slowly struggled to my feet. Someone noticed me getting up, and a person nearby whistled mockingly, "Already leaving? Not going to wait until Ethan is done shooting?" Usually, I would remain kneeling until he finished the shoot before standing up. But this time, I wouldn't. Ethan spoke in a cold, rough voice, his breath heavy. "Tell her to get out. Why is she pretending to be tough? She's a groveling creature. Are you afraid she'd have the guts not to come back?" At his words, everyone present burst into loud laughter. They made bets right in front of me. They bet that even if I left now, I'd be begging Ethan to open the door and let me in by nightfall. Watching Cassidy become more and more exposed in front of everyone, my heart felt as if it were bleeding. I knew that due to the unique nature of Ethan's photoshoots, these scenes might be considered normal in the industry. But ultimately, I couldn't accept watching one young, beautiful woman after another engage in sexual acts with my husband right in front of me. The eyes of the surrounding crowd darted back and forth between us. Afterward, Ethan looked up and instructed me. "Cassidy still has too much internal heat. Go back and prepare a pot of cooling broth." Ethan held Cassidy, and the thin blanket draped over them couldn't conceal the flushed marks they'd left on each other. My heart was trembling as I spoke with difficulty. "I can do it, but the cost of the ingredients." Before I could finish, Cassidy gasped in Ethan's arms. "Oh, sister, seriously? Does not provide you with food or drink? Do you really need to be so precise about such a small amount of money? You live in Ethan's house. Every single thing you eat, drink, or use, isn't he the one who pays for it? Now he's just asking you to make some soup, and you're already rushing to haggle over mon. EY with him. Are you treating Ethan's home like a market where you can bargain?" She snuggled further into Ethan's arms, her fingertips tracing his collarbone. "Besides, sister, with your frail constitution, constantly dizzy or having stomach aches, Ethan hasn't kicked you out yet, and that's a blessing. And you dare to bring up money? Aren't you trying to save this money to run away?" She deliberately sat up straight, puffing out her chest. The moment the blanket slipped down, Ethan gently kissed her chest. She truly was one of the top 3 models in the LA modeling scene. Her facial features, proportions, and figure were truly dazzling. Then I looked at myself. I saw a faded, worn-out t-shirt, and my body was so thin I was almost skin and bones. My complexion was dull, and I had no energy or spirit. In's eyes, I was perhaps worse than a maid, just a dog trailing behind him. To outsiders, I was the wife of renowned photographer Ethan. He came from a prominent family, his family's wealth was among the best in their circle, and he himself had won countless awards. Netizens always envied me, saying that Ethan's wife must have accumulated great virtue in her past life, experiencing such good fortune that one couldn't achieve in several lifetimes. But the outward glamour and good fortune were nothing but an illusion. But the reality, right now, was unbearable. He took all my documents, and only gave me my phone once every few days, allowing me to use it for just 10 minutes each time. For 3 years, I had no money, no time for myself, and hadn't even had a proper conversation with anyone other than Ethan. So, you want to run away, do you? Ethan looked at me with a face full of disgust, casually pulling a few banknotes from his wallet and throwing them at me. The paper money, sharp as it flew, sliced across my cheek and, once again, it sliced across my dignity. Richard was still unconscious, needing medication daily to maintain his bodily functions. And was paying for all of it. What was a little dignity compared to that? I crouched down and picked them up, one by one. I stood up and calmly turned around. As I was about to walk out the door, I felt a burning gaze on my back. He called out to me. He said coldly, "Leave that Lucky Charm necklace you're wearing. Cassidy hasn't been sleeping well lately." This necklace was a memento left by my mother, Eleanor. My eyes instantly reddened. I stared at him in disbelief. Ethan remained cold. "How much do you want? Name your price." I clutched the necklace tightly. He knew perfectly well the origin of this necklace, how important it was to me, that it was my only keepsake. Trembling, I took off the Lucky Charm necklace, my nose stinging, and handed it to Cassidy. I choked out, "I hope you treat it well, and I hope you have good dreams every night." At my words, Ethan's face, rarely kind, softened slightly. Soon after Cassidy took the necklace, she let out a cry of alarm. Large red rashes appeared on her arms. He shoved me aside, clutching Cassidy, and headed out, ordering me to drive them to the hospital. On the way, the pain in my lower abdomen made cold sweat bead on my forehead. It seemed to be getting worse. Ethan sat in the back, his arms wrapped around Cassidy. He was softly murmuring reassurances, and in the rearview mirror, I saw Cassidy give me an indifferent smile. At the hospital, after a series of examinations, the doctor said that the necklace had been coated with a substance Cassidy was allergic to. Fortunately, they got treatment in time, otherwise, she could have gone into anaphylactic shock. No sooner had the doctor finished speaking than he inexplicably slapped me across the face. "How did you become so malicious? Cassidy never harmed you in the slightest. How dare you try to kill her like this?" He seized my wrist, twisting it as if to break it. "If anything happens to her, I'll flay you alive." I looked at the protective tenderness in his eyes for someone else, ND felt as if even breathing was agonizing. 3 years ago, Ethan, coming from a good family and having suddenly shot up the ranks to become a renowned photographer, had offended many with his blunt nature. During an outing, he was retaliated against and kidnapped. They even intended to sell him overseas. Richard was the lead detective on the case at the time, and was shot while saving Ethan's life. In the beginning, he wasn't as cold-hearted as rumored. While was being resuscitated, he paid all of my father's medical expenses, and still does. Even though Richard ended up in a vegetative state, I was still grateful. I remember he appeared frantically at my house that afternoon, kneeling and begging my mother, Eleanor, for my hand in marriage. Eleanor smiled, placing my hand in his, and reassuringly said, "My sweetheart, her father owes you so much to you. She has a difficult temper, so please be more patient with her in the future." But in a blink of an eye, on the 3rd day of our marriage, on the way to her parents' home, Eleanor was in a car accident while out shopping and died instantly. After that, Ethan seemed to revert to the man the LA modeling scene had always rumored him to be. During several nights of torment, he would grip my throat and whisper warnings in my ear, "Sarah, you'll never leave me in this lifetime, never." Those words felt like a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I couldn't break free. How could I forget that Ethan, a ruthless character in the cutthroat world of celebrity, was more obsessed with control and violence than with tenderness and care? How could I forget that even if he wrapped himself in a veneer of gentleness, he couldn't hide the cold cruelty deep in his bones? Our relationship, with its distinct phases, should have been severed from the very beginning. After the hospital results came out, they didn't wait for me and went straight back to the mansion outside of town. By the time I walked back step by step, enduring the persistent aching in my lower abdomen, it was already early the next morning. From the master bedroom, waves of pleasure could still be heard. My palm, gripping the doorknob, broke out in a sweat. I looked at the only photo of Ethan and me from our wedding, displayed in the living room. My throat felt dry. After staring at it for a long time, I took it down and cut it into tiny pieces with scissors. I wanted to find a painkiller, but found it had been thrown into the trash can, mixed with leftover soup. I silently curled up beside the trash can. My pant legs gradually became soaked with blood, my consciousness blurred, and I passed out. I was awakened by a basin of ice water. Drowsily, I felt a figure pressing down on me. Before I could fully regain my senses, I heard a surprised female voice from the doorway. "Sister, Ethan looked for you all last night. So you've been hiding in this room all along. If you were back, you could have told Ethan, instead of making us search for so long, and then there's this, and this." It was then I realized I had been stripped naked, and my entire body ached. The man on top of me had one arm wrapped around me, and the other gripping my breast. Everywhere I looked, my skin was covered in red marks. This room was originally the maid's room. A year ago, the maids, opportunistically, had forced me into this room. It was narrow and stuffy. Panicked, I pushed the man off me, my body trembling uncontrollably. Ethan strode in, and in a fit of rage, grabbed the man's hair and punched him. "You dare touch my woman? You must be tired of living." The man was instantly beaten black and blue. He covered his mouth and seized the chance to escape. Ethan turned to look at me, his face flushed crimson with rage, veins bulging in his neck. He roared at me, "Sarah, you degrade yourself like this? You really are something." I thought he would hit me, but to my surprise, the fist he raised slammed into the wall instead. Then he strode away. Cassidy leaned against the doorway and sneered, "Well, Sarah, how did that feel? I am Ethan's wife. Aren't you afraid of the consequences when he finds out the truth about you doing this to me?" Cassidy scoffed. She walked up to me and poked my lower abdomen with her fingernail. "Wife? Sarah, you must be delirious from the pain. Do you really think Ethan considers you his wife?" She suddenly leaned closer, her words dripping with venom in my ear. "Do you know? The substance on that Lucky Charm necklace didn't just give me a rash, it also caused you a uterine hemorrhage. The doctor said you'll never be able to have children, ha ha ha." My entire body went rigid. No wonder my lower abdomen had been aching so persistently yesterday. It was all thanks to her. It was all Cassidy. No, none of this should have happened had I never met Ethan. Richard, if you hadn't led the team to rescue Ethan that year, would none of this have happened now? I raised my hand to wipe away the tears from my face, then looked up furiously and lunged at her. But she deftly dodged me, and my lower back slammed into the corner of a nearby table, the pain making my vision go black. Cassidy backed away, covering her mouth, a look of excitement on her face. "Ethan desperately wants a child. Do you think he'll keep you when he finds out you can't have children?" I glared at her fiercely, my teeth chattering. Ethan and I hadn't been without children before, but I had miscarried 2 pregnancies unexpectedly, and the cause was never found. After that, his attitude changed drastically, and he never touched me again. From then on, he enacted all sorts of explicit scenes with various models, while always making me watch. Just then, a cat's meow echoed from the living room. It was the ginger cat Ethan and I had adopted when we first got married. I called him Leo. He was the only living creature in this mansion who would rub against my hand. But at that moment, his meows were incredibly pitiful. I struggled and ran out. I saw Cassidy's assistant holding Leo down, a needle being inserted into his neck. "What are you doing?" I screamed, trying to stop her, but Cassidy grabbed me instantly. I watched as the assistant transferred blood from Leo to a ragdoll cat nearby. Cassidy said nonchalantly from behind me, "Maya's sick, and the vet said he needs a blood transfusion. This little cat's blood type just happens to match. Look how lively he is, what's wrong with him donating a little blood? He's so small. If you draw blood like this, you'll kill him." I watched helplessly as Leo's meows grew weaker and weaker. Soon, he didn't even need to be held down, he just lay on the ground, losing strength. His once bright eyes slowly lost their sparkle, and the fur around his neck was soaked with blood. When the assistant pulled out the needle, Leo was already lifeless. His tiny body curled into a ball, his limbs still twitching faintly. "Oh, dear, why did it die?" Cassidy feigned regret. "If I'd known it was so weak to drawing blood, I would have found another cat." "Don't blame me, Sarah. Blame its own bad luck." A maid, who had been standing nearby, chimed in obsequiously. "Miss, we were already fed up with this stray cat. It was always scratching things and was such a nuisance." Yes, yes, your cat looks so luxurious. Look how shiny his fur is. Cassidy suddenly released me. I rushed over and picked up Leo's cold body. Tears streamed uncontrollably down my face. Leo hadn't even grown up properly, and his life was just gone. Now my hope for a child was gone, and even my little cat had been killed by them. What's all this noise? Ethan's voice came from the doorway. His tie was loosely draped around his neck, and his face was flushed with alcohol. Cassidy's eyes immediately welled up. She threw herself into his arms, sobbing. Ethan, I heard you loved Leo so much. Today, I brought my sick Snowy over to play, but sister suddenly insisted Leo give Snowy a blood transfusion. I told her there are blood banks at the pet hospital, but she wouldn't listen, and I couldn't stop her. Ethan, I'm so sad. Leo just died from having his blood drawn like that. The moment Ethan heard that I had killed Leo, the alcohol fumes instantly vanished from him. I wanted to explain, but he suddenly smiled at me, his expression turning cold instantly. He took out his phone and pressed the call button right in front of me. Stop the services over there today. With that, he snatched Leo from my arms and walked out. I trembled, a terrible premonition washing over me. Just then, Cassidy, I don't know from where, found my phone and handed it to me. The moment I took it, the phone rang, showing a call from Richard's attending physician. My fingertips trembled. I nervously answered the call, and a suffocating voice came through the receiver. Madam, your father just stopped breathing. He has passed away. Please accept our condolences. A hum filled my ears, and all other sounds around me instantly faded. My heart skipped a beat. I stared blankly ahead, not a single tear would fall from my eyes. Cassidy and her group left with mocking smiles, leaving me alone in the mansion. That evening, a news report stated, early this morning, a woman in our city fell from a bridge, holding a cremation urn, and died. Police have launched an investigation. People thought this was just an ordinary suicide news report, but no one knew it would trigger immense repercussions. By the time Ethan received this news, it was already the evening of the next day. He hadn't seen me all day, yet felt no surprise. Perhaps he hadn't even noticed that someone was missing from the house. The report stated that the woman fell from the riverside, holding a cremation urn. Surveillance footage showed her standing by the railing for 3 full hours. At 4 in the morning, she leaped. It took the salvage team 6 hours to find the cremation urn, but the person had disappeared, carried away by the swift river current. But suddenly noticed that the woman's figure closely resembled Sarah. What made his skin crawl even more was that the faintly visible inscription on the side of the cremation urn seemed to be Richard's name. Was this a coincidence? He continued to zoom in on the image in disbelief. Impossible, he muttered to himself, his fingers frantically zooming in on the picture. Suddenly, Ethan's phone hit the ground with a smack, and the glass coffee table hummed from the impact. Cassidy emerged from the bedroom, wrapped in a bathrobe, the Lucky Charm necklace clasped around her neck. Seeing his ashen face, she hurried over. Ethan, what's wrong? Normally, he found Cassidy's voice pleasant, but now, in his irritation, he wished he could sew her mouth shut. Ethan fiercely gripped her wrist. Is dead? Cassidy's eyes suddenly showed panic, then she feigned tears. What happened? Did she take her own life? After all, Richard had just passed away, and she must have been suffering. Shut up. Who gave you permission to call her sister? You're not worthy. He stepped forward, his tall figure looming over Cassidy, making her gasp for breath. And who told you her father, Richard, died? Ethan looked down at her, disgust brimming in his eyes. Looking at your face truly makes me sick. With that, he dialed the hospital. Mr. Ethan? Are you asking about Mr. Richard? 3 days ago, a lady said she was acting on your behalf to stop the medication and presented your authorization letter. The patient passed away yesterday morning. Later, your wife came to arrange for cremation, saying it was your instruction. Mr. Ethan, weren't you aware of this? Ethan's hand trembled as he hung up the phone. He suddenly remembered that yesterday morning, he had clearly said, stop the caregiver's services over there today. He had only wanted to suspend the caregiver's services for 1 day yesterday. He was just angry at Sarah for killing Leo and wanted her to suffer a bit. When had he ever said to stop the medication? He abruptly hung up the phone and turned to glare fiercely at Cassidy. What about the authorization letter? Did you go to the hospital? Cassidy felt a chill run down her spine under his gaze. She tried to compose herself, shrinking back slightly. Ethan, what are you implying? Why would I go to the hospital? Don't listen to their nonsense. Ethan suddenly laughed. I'm going to check the hospital surveillance footage right now. How long do you think you can hide it? Without waiting for Cassidy's reply, Ethan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. At that moment, the facade of fragility on Cassidy's face instantly crumbled. She gritted her teeth, glaring at the closed door. Sarah, you can't even rest in peace after death. Ethan stumbled to the hospital, forcing them to retrieve all surveillance footage. 3 days ago, Cassidy's assistant entered the hospital pharmacy with his authorization letter. The imported medication that maintained Richard's vital signs had been swapped for saline solution. Meanwhile, Cassidy herself was sitting on a bench in the hospital garden, chuckling softly into her phone. Don't worry, I've already arranged everything with the caregiver. Just say Ethan instructed to stop the medication for 3 days. No one will find out. He froze in place, the cigarette clutched between his fingers burned down to its end, but he was oblivious. Back home, he instructed the housekeeper to send him the house's surveillance footage. The footage showed Cassidy's smile as she instructed her assistant to hold Leo down for a blood draw, and even a year ago, she secretly added ingredients that induce contractions to Sarah's medication to support the pregnancy, leading to Sarah's second miscarriage. What chilled him to the bone most was a deleted yet recovered video. Cassidy said to a man, "Make it loud later, so Ethan sees her in that vulnerable state, he'll never touch her again in his life. Oh, and remember to leave some marks on her, the more visible, the better. Anyway, do whatever you want with her." Ah! A loud crash came from the study. Ethan kicked over the mahogany desk. He remembered the way Sarah had curled up in the bathroom on the day of her first miscarriage. He remembered her lips bitten tight every time she suffered from abdominal pain, and her reddened eyes when she handed over the Lucky Charm necklace. Cassidy heard the commotion and had just pushed the door open to enter, when Ethan seized her by the throat and pinned her against the wall. His eyes surged with a never-before-seen crimson rage. Did you stop Richard's medication? Did you make her unable to have children? Did you kill Leo? Ethan, listen to me. Cassidy's face was turning purple from his grip, her fingernails desperately clawed at his arm. Explain? Ethan scoffed. It's because I love you. She's completely unworthy of you. She's just a burden from your sense of obligation. Obligation? Ethan sneered, tightening his grip. What do you know? How could I not know? Cassidy suddenly shrieked, throwing caution to the wind. You think you were good to her? You kept her trapped by your side, tormenting her for 3 years, making her watch you be intimate with other women, making her kneel and serve others. You don't love her at all, you just enjoy the feeling of controlling her. She gasped for breath. You're afraid to admit you love her. You were afraid she'd leave, so you tied her to your side in the most bastardly way. Do you think I don't know? Every time you finished those disgusting shoots, you'd secretly go check if she was asleep at night. Shut up! Ethan roared, cutting her off, the hand gripping her throat trembling slightly. I'll say it anyway. Cassidy laughed maniacally. You're a coward. You loved her but dared not say it, you hated her leaving but only used violence. Now she's dead, are you satisfied? You killed her with your own hands. You killed her. SM. Ack. A loud slap landed across Cassidy's face. Her head snapped to the side, and a trickle of blood seeped from the corner of her mouth. Ethan released his grip. She collapsed to the floor, coughing violently. What are you, exactly? Do you think you're fit to put on an act in front of me? Do you truly believe you could replace Sarah? He crouched down, seizing her chin and forcing her to look up. You think making her watch every time was giving you face? I was making her see clearly that a fawning, begging creature like you isn't even fit to carry her shoes. He scoffed. His grip was so strong that tears streamed down Cassidy's face from the pain. You like to act, don't you? I'll give you a real show. He suddenly released his grip and pulled a bottle of clear liquid from a drawer. It was a drug that rapidly rendered one powerless yet fully conscious. Cassidy recognized the label on the bottle, her face turning ashen with terror. Ethan, what are you doing? You can't do this to me. I'm one of the top 3 models in the LA modeling scene. My company won't let you get away with this. Ethan ignored her screams, pinched her jaw, and forcibly poured the liquid into her mouth. Cassidy struggled desperately, but she couldn't stop the liquid from flowing in. Soon, her body went limp, and she lay sprawled on the floor, her eyes glazed over. Sarah was his only wife. Even though he had been with so many models, the others were merely tools for his casual dalliances. He wouldn't allow Sarah's vulnerable side to be exposed on camera. He just wanted Sarah not to leave him. Afterward, Ethan made a phone call, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Call the producer who has a grudge against Cassidy. I'll text you the address." Less than half an hour later, a man walked into the mansion, his eyes malicious. "Ethan, what is this?" The man rubbed his hands together, his eyes glinting with greed. Ethan sat down on the sofa, leisurely setting up a camera. The lens pointed directly at Cassidy. "Doesn't she like to use her body to gain resources? Today, I'll grant her wish." Cassidy screamed, trying to escape. But the drug had already taken effect, and she was powerless. Ethan never looked at her again. His face expressionless, he just stared at the camera's monitor. He wasn't seeking revenge on Cassidy, he was punishing himself. Punishing himself for his blindness of heart and mind, for his cruelty and harshness, for having personally destroyed the only person he had ever loved. 3 days later, Cassidy's high-definition video went viral across the internet, and she no longer had a place in the LA modeling scene. Meanwhile, Ethan stood on the riverside. The river wind whipped his trench coat, and in his hand, he clutched the necklace. The salvage team had long since withdrawn, and the police had closed the case as a missing person. Many people told him there was no hope. The bridge was over 20 meters above the river, and even if someone could swim, with such swift currents, it would be truly difficult to survive. But he refused to believe Sarah was dead. He needed to see her alive, or her body if she was dead. The girl who had looked at him shyly, the girl who had stayed by his bed, feeding him warm water all night after he got drunk, the girl he had tormented for 3 years, yet had never truly hated him, how could she just disappear like this? "Sarah, come out," he rasped at the surging river. His apple bobbed twice, but only a dry sob escaped him. "I know you're watching. I was wrong. Please, come back, okay?" His only reply was the sound of car horns from the road. He began to search frantically. He used his family's influence to blockade all sea exits. He accessed national traffic surveillance through his dark web connections, even offering a reward of $100 million to find her. Ethan dismissed all the servants in the mansion who had abused Sarah. He preserved the maid's room in the mansion where Sarah had lived exactly as it was. Every evening, he would go and sit there for a while, the floor still seemed to bear the imprints of her kneeling. Later, he found her hidden diary under the bed. "Today, Ethan gave me a slice of cake. It was strawberry-flavored, just how I like it. Did he remember my birthday? My lower abdomen hurts again. I hope I can keep this baby this time." Richard's hand moved a little today. He's definitely going to wake up. The last page read, "If I die, I hope to be buried with Eleanor." Ethan held the diary and cried all night long in the empty mansion. 7 years passed in a blink. Ethan became a marginalized figure in the LA modeling scene. Everyone had already forgotten the name of the once renowned photographer. He was still a photographer, but his lens no longer featured any people. Only stark architecture and desolate landscapes remained. In his mansion's bedroom, a light was always left on. The missing person poster on his desk was replaced again and again. Sarah in the photo was still the same as 7 years ago, wearing that faded t-shirt, but her eyes were bright. "Yes, I didn't die." Everyone thought the woman who had leaped from the riverside had long been swallowed by the swift river current, with not even a trace of her remains. But they didn't know I had made preparations 3 days before jumping off the bridge. Richard's attending physician was an old classmate of my mother, Eleanor's. He took extra care of Richard after Eleanor passed away. During those 10 minutes Ethan allowed me to use my phone, I would communicate with him about Richard's condition. And it was during those days that I learned someone had secretly switched Richard's medication. The doctor helped me swap it out, still using the original medicine. When he said the patient has passed away on the phone that day, I knew my chance had come. After hung up the phone and Cassidy and her group left, I pulled out the utility knife and first aid kit hidden under the mattress. I had accumulated these over 6 months, preparing them secretly whenever Ethan was away on business. Then I tightly wrapped the pre-prepared cremation urn in a cloth bag. At 3 in the morning, I walked out of the mansion wearing my thickest coat. The railings of the riverside were covered in a thin layer of frost. I stood where the surveillance cameras could capture me. I stood for 3 hours. I wasn't hesitating, I was observing the current. I knew there was an eddy 3 kilometers downstream, with dense reeds along the bank. Ethan always said I was weak as a mouse, but he forgot that Richard, my father, was a detective. From a young age, he taught me how to discern the direction of water currents and how to find life in desperate situations. At 4 in the morning, I took a deep breath, clutched the cremation urn, and leaped. The icy river water instantly swallowed me. The immense impact caused sharp pain in my chest, and I choked on several mouthfuls of murky water. I gritted my teeth and used the utility knife to cut through my coat, which had become entangled around me by the current. Curling my body into the posture Richard had taught me, I drifted with the current toward the eddy. The bone-chilling river water froze me to the point of near unconsciousness. But the empty cremation urn in my arms pressed against my chest, as if pushing me forward. I don't know how long I drifted, but finally, my hand touched the roots of the reeds. The sky was faintly lit. I dragged my soaked body onto the bank, collapsing into the reeds, my entire body purple with cold. I hid there all day, and only dared to emerge after nightfall. The suburban area along the river was very remote, and my body was in immense pain. But I didn't dare go to a hospital, fearing Ethan's people would find me. I could only use my remaining strength to walk toward the more remote mountainous area. When I was hungry, I picked wild berries, and when I was thirsty, I drank spring water. It wasn't until the 7th day that I collapsed in a secluded valley, and only woke up to realize Jason had saved me. Don't be afraid. My name is Jason, and I'm a village doctor from nearby. He pushed a bowl of medicine toward me. I found you in a secluded valley. You were running a high fever, and you had injuries. I stared at the bowl of medicine in his hand, not daring to speak. Jason didn't force me. He simply placed the bowl within my reach. Drink the medicine once it's cool enough, it's for your fever. I won't harm you. If you want to leave, you can go at dawn. That night, he truly didn't come near me again. The bonfire crackled, and surprisingly, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. I didn't leave the next day. Using his phone, I called the doctor. The doctor was delighted to hear from me, and told me that Richard had been safely settled in his home, telling me not to worry. Jason said his clinic was in the small town, and he was in need of someone to help prepare medicines. He asked if I was willing to stay. I looked into his sincere eyes and nodded. I needed a place to settle down, and a new identity to live by. Jason gave me a new name, Annie. He said he hoped I would be safe and sound from then on. The people in the small town were simple and kind-hearted. They simply regarded me as a pitiful person who had suffered, and no one questioned my past. The first days were difficult. At night, I always had nightmares, dreaming of Ethan's fists, Cassidy's laughter, and Leo's cold body. Jason noticed I suffered from insomnia, so he brewed calming herbal teas for me every night. He would sit by the table, reading a book, accompanying me until I fell asleep before returning to his own room. He never asked about my past, but quietly took care of everything for me. Knowing I was wary of strangers, he never allowed patients to linger in the clinic. Knowing I liked peace and quiet, he tidied up the small yard behind the clinic, planting it with wildflowers. Those names I didn't know. Knowing greasy food nauseated me, he would prepare light porridges and side dishes in different ways every day. That night, I saw a report about Ethan on TV, saying he had blacklisted all his previous models. My body instantly trembled from the trauma. Jason, looking sad, pulled me into his embrace. It was the first time I had cried in front of him. Not because of fear, but because it had been so long since anyone had treated me with such gentleness. Jason quietly handed me a tissue, and only spoke softly when I had finished crying. If you don't want to talk about the past, then don't. But don't let it trap you. I gradually began to open up. I told him I had a father, Richard, who loved me very much, a detective who was injured saving someone. I told him I had a cat named Leo, who was very well behaved and affectionate, and now I just wanted to find a safe place to live quietly. I didn't mention Ethan, or those unbearable past events, but Jason understood. He held my hand and said, "With me here, no one will ever bully you again." It wasn't until the winter of the 7th year that Ethan suddenly appeared at the clinic doorway. He was wearing a dark trench coat, his eyes bloodshot. I looked at him, my heart calm. I ignored him and lowered my head to feed medicine to a child with a fever. His gaze fell to my neck. It was bare. His gaze then fell to my wrist. On my wrist, however, was a cheap red string bracelet. "Sarah," Ethan suddenly shouted. I straightened up, then calmly smiled. "Sir, you've got the wrong person." He rushed over and grabbed my wrist. I've been looking for you for 7 years, he hissed. How dare you, let her go. A dark-skinned man walked over, shielding me behind him. Who are you? I gently pulled my hand free from his grasp, tugging on Jason's sleeve. Jason, let's go. My steps were steady, unlike before, when I always kept my head down. Snowflakes landed in my hair, melting instantly into water, failing to stir any ripples. This time, I didn't run, because I knew my home was here, my peace was here, and my new beginning was here. The river had carried away my past, and Jason had given me the sunshine for the rest of my life.